I'm Lauren, 32, and until last week, I thought postponing a wedding would be the most complicated thing I'd ever survive. I was wrong. It wasn't the canceled flowers or the unreturned RSVP cards or even the silence that followed Jake's sudden deployment. It was what came after. If you're watching this, hit like and subscribe. Because the next 10 minutes will tell you exactly how a mother-in-law's icy dismissal nearly shattered everything I believed about love, family, and resilience. 3 days before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my fiancé, Marine Captain Jake Whitaker, called me from a base in California. His voice was calm but clipped, the way it always got when duty called. "They need me in South Sudan," he said. "Humanitarian deployment. 48 hours notice." I didn't cry. Not right then. Instead, I smiled through the phone, said I understood, said I was proud of him, and hung up with my chest burning. I stood there in my almost finished wedding dress, staring out at the rain streaking down the studio window like the world itself was mourning the change in plans. My mother tried to soften it, offered to host a wedding-themed brunch that Sunday for the family who would have been in town. Jake's cousins were already flying in from Dallas. My sister had taken time off work. I didn't want pity, but I also didn't want to sit alone in that echoing silence. So we gathered. Everyone smiled too hard, hugged too long, and avoided the words canceled or postponed like they were taboo. The food was beautiful, the wine was flowing. And then she arrived. Margaret Whitaker, Jake's mother. Hair sculpted to perfection, lipstick unmoved by emotion. She walked in, her heels clicking across the hardwood like a warning. She didn't kiss my cheek, didn't say she was sorry about the news. Instead, she waited until dessert, when the room had grown quiet with too much red velvet cake and too little to say. "I will not be attending a non-wedding," she said, standing, "and frankly, this charade embarrasses me." The room froze. My mother's hand hovered mid-air holding a fork. My sister's eyes darted between us. No one said a word. Margaret looked right at me. "It's not personal, Lauren, but this gathering, it feels performative. Jake's not here. There's no ceremony. So what exactly are we celebrating?" And then she turned, picked up her clutch, walked out. That was the moment the silence cracked. The air felt thick, like breathing through water. My spine stiffened. I smiled, one of those cold, practiced smiles I hadn't used since corporate fundraising events. "I suppose," I said, standing, "some people confuse appearances with meaning." Nobody laughed. But no one followed her either. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment, wedding dress still hanging on the door. I opened the last letter Jake had sent, one of the ones he'd tucked into the emergency kit we made in case he had to leave fast. It was short, scribbled in that rushed scrawl I loved. "I'm sorry I left. But I didn't leave you. I chose service. But I never stopped choosing you too. Always you. Always me. So no, the wedding didn't happen. But neither did the end. Not for me. Not for us." Margaret could walk out of the room. But I wasn't going anywhere. The church smelled like lilies and eucalyptus. Soft, expensive, purposeful. The kind of scent you only notice when everything else is too quiet. I stood just inside the double doors, staring down the aisle that was supposed to be mine. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, throwing fractured colors across the pews. There were no guests, no music, just rows of white cushions and the faint echo of my own breathing. This was supposed to be the moment I'd remember for the rest of my life. Jake at the end of the aisle, my father on my arm, the kind of smile that hurts your cheeks from holding it too long. Instead, I stood there alone, veil folded in my purse, bouquet abandoned in a hotel fridge. I walked down the aisle anyway, slowly, one foot in front of the other. Not because I thought someone would appear, or because I was trying to create a memory, but because I needed to prove to myself I could make the walk, even if no one was waiting at the end. Halfway down, my heel caught in the carpet. I stumbled, caught myself, and laughed. That brittle kind of laugh that threatens to crack open into something uglier. I let it out anyway. It felt better than silence. At the altar, I sat down on the front pew. The church was still dressed for us. Ivory ribbons, soft roses, candles no one had lit. It was beautiful. And it was completely wrong. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling through old photos. Jake in his dress blues, grinning beside me at the Marine Corps ball. Us in Glacier Park, wind tangling my hair while he pointed toward the mountains. The video of him asking me to marry him on the same bench where we'd had our first kiss. And then the photo of Margaret. Her arm looped stiffly around mine at my bridal shower. Her smile polite, eyes narrowed just enough to betray how she really felt. That was the day I should have known. The way she watched me like I was a variable she hadn't approved. Winning her over had felt like climbing a mountain in heels, painful, exhausting, and never quite enough. I learned her favorite wine, remembered her cousins' names, wore cream instead of white to avoid attention. I listened to stories about her sorority, laughed at jokes that belittled my career, bit my tongue every time she called my job noble. In the same tone someone might use to describe volunteering at a soup kitchen. But I tried. God, I tried. Because Jake loved her, and I loved Jake. And now here I was, alone in a church we'd booked 2 years ago, dressed like a guest at my own wedding. That wasn't, watching sunbeams catch dust in the air like floating confetti. I took one last look around and stood up. I wasn't walking away from this moment. I was walking through it. Because the aisle wasn't just a path to Jake anymore. It was a line I'd crossed, for myself. And maybe for the woman I'd have to become, now that everything was different. My sister Dana showed up the next morning with croissants, 2 coffees, and a look that said she'd been waiting for me to fall apart. I hadn't cried yet, not really. Just a few angry tears in the car after the brunch when Margaret had left everyone blinking in stunned silence and muttering excuses. But full-on, chest-heaving sobs? Those were still pending. Dana didn't push. She just sat on my couch, kicking off her shoes, and handed me the stronger coffee without asking. I figured you wouldn't sleep, she said. I didn't. We sipped in silence for a minute. I couldn't stop staring at the framed picture on my bookshelf, me and Jake at our engagement party, my lipstick on his cheek, his eyes fixed on me like I was the whole world. She humiliated you, Dana said eventually. Yeah. I rubbed at a smudge on the ceramic mug like I could scrub the memory away. In front of everyone. Dana nodded. She's always had a thing for control. I remember at Thanksgiving last year when you brought the pecan pie, and she asked if it had real sugar like it was poison. She thinks she's protecting him. She's protecting her ego. I didn't respond. Mostly because the words hit too close to the part of me that still wanted to believe Margaret's love for Jake was enough to make her decent. But it wasn't. Not when it came to me. You're allowed to be angry, Lauren, Dana added gently. You've spent the last 2 years trying to prove you belong, and now she's using his deployment to ice you out like you were just some placeholder until he came back. That part hurt the most. Not the postponement. Not even Margaret's speech. It was the way it echoed every time someone had told me my life wasn't quite real. That being 32 and unmarried made me unstable. That my work in nonprofit leadership wasn't ambitious. That helping people wasn't the same thing as succeeding. I'd spent years hearing it. At school reunions. At family weddings. In the way strangers reacted when I said I didn't want a big house or 3 kids or a Pinterest-perfect kitchen. I wanted impact. Movement. Meaning. But no one ever seemed impressed by that. Until Jake. He saw me. The real me. The girl who spent Saturdays writing grants for food banks and weekdays organizing community workshops. He never rolled his eyes when I stayed up late editing flyers or spent our date nights talking about housing legislation. And his mother hated that. Hated that her son might marry someone who didn't fit the mold. Someone who wouldn't quit her job and throw fundraising galas for the country club. She never saw me, I whispered, my voice cracking for the first time. I bent myself into every shape she asked for, and she still never saw me. Dana reached over, wrapped her arms around me, and let me cry into her shoulder until the coffee went cold and the grief finally found a way out. It was a Tuesday morning when I found the letter. Folded into thirds, tucked between the pages of a dog-eared novel Jake had left on the nightstand. The spine was cracked. Mountains beyond mountains. One of those books he said made him think bigger. I picked it up absently, more out of habit than curiosity, and the envelope slipped free, landing at my feet. It wasn't sealed, just folded neatly, written in that sharp, fast handwriting Jake used when he was short on time but full of feeling. Lo, that's how it started. Not Lauren, not sweetheart, just Lo, the nickname he only used when he was tired or soft or in love. Lo, I hate leaving like this. I didn't even get to see your face when they told us. One second I was packing cufflinks, the next I was boarding a C-17 he headed toward a mission brief. I don't know how long I'll be gone, but I need you to know this. It was never a choice between you and the Marines. It was always both. It was always you. I read it once. Then again. By the third read, my eyes were stinging. I know how this looks. A canceled wedding. A mother who still thinks you're a temporary chapter. A day that was supposed to be yours turned into silence and sideways glances. I hate that I left you in the middle of all that. But Lo, I didn't leave you, I just stepped out of the frame for a while. And I need you to hold the picture until I get back. Tell them whatever you want, that we're still on, that I'm yours, that I believe in everything we planned. Especially you. I sat on the edge of the bed, letter in hand, heart thudding so loud it drowned out the rest of the apartment. It wasn't just a note, it was a rope, tossed back from across the ocean, a lifeline to something steady in the middle of all this fractured uncertainty. And it did something to me. Something I hadn't expected. It reminded me that I wasn't waiting for permission, that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Not to Margaret, not to Jake's cousins who thought I wasn't military wife material, not even to the neighbors who looked at my ringless finger and whispered, "Cold feet," like they knew anything. This wasn't over. It wasn't some pity story with a tragic middle and no ending. Jake believed in me. And more than that, he trusted me with the future we were still building, even if one of us had to be 7,000 miles away while we built it. So I stood up, folded the letter, placed it back between the pages, and smoothed the book cover like I was sealing something sacred. Then I walked to my desk, opened my laptop, and started planning. Not a wedding, not yet, something different, something that would carry both of us forward. And show everyone that love, real love, doesn't disappear just because someone isn't there to witness it. It started with a headline. Community honors deployed soldiers with care packages and local drive. I don't even know why I clicked it. Probably because the photo reminded me of Jake. Young Marines in desert camo, loading boxes into a truck. Smiling, focused, tired but proud. The kind of smile Jake wore when he talked about the interpreter who taught him Arabic slang or the little girl who braided his hair with army green string. As I read the article, something lit up in my chest. Not grief, not longing, not even anger. Purpose. The story described a town 3 states over that had turned a military send-off into a public service event. Food drives, letters to troops, booths where kids could learn to fold flags and write thank you cards. The bride whose fiancé had left the week before had spearheaded it all. She didn't cancel her venue deposit, she turned it into a command post. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt too quiet, too finished, like I was waiting for something that wasn't going to knock. So I got out of bed, pulled my laptop close, and opened a blank document. Deployment Day Drive, I typed at the top. Honoring Captain Jake Whitaker and all servicemen and women abroad. The cursor blinked at me, daring me to believe it could matter. What if I didn't let the wedding go to waste? What if, instead of mourning it, I transformed it? Not just the venue, the whole thing. The flowers could go to nursing homes. The catering could feed volunteers. The church hall could be filled with stations, one for letters, one for care kits, one for veterans to speak. I sat there for hours, outlining every detail. Who I'd call, what I'd need, how I could make people care. By sunrise, I had 3 pages of notes and a plan that made my pulse race for the first time in days. I wasn't replacing Jake. I was echoing him. Carrying the thread of his work here, where people could feel it. Where Margaret and everyone else could see that this wasn't about pretending everything was fine. It was about showing that commitment isn't just something you say at an altar. It's something you do when the altar disappears. I sent the first emails before brushing my teeth. Local veterans groups. The American Legion. Our neighborhood high school's ROTC coordinator. The subject line was simple. an invitation to serve, together. And as I pressed send, I realized something. I wasn't just honoring Jake, I was reclaiming my name in the story. No longer the girl left behind, not the almost wife in waiting. I was still standing. And this time, the whole town would know exactly what for. The first call I made was to the VFW. I didn't even know what the acronym stood for until I looked it up. Veterans of Foreign Wars. But I found the number on a faded website and dialed before I could overthink it. The man who answered sounded like he'd been awake since dawn. VFW Post 1148, this is Roger. Hi, I said, voice wobbling more than I wanted it to. My name's Lauren Temple, my fiancé was just deployed and I'm planning something. An event. And I could really use your help. There was a pause on the line. I braced myself for a polite dismissal, maybe we'll get back to you. But then he said, go on, sweetheart. So I did. I told him about the postponed wedding, about Jake, about the empty church and the dress still hanging in the closet. I told him I wanted to turn that day into something meaningful, something rooted in service instead of silence. I don't remember exactly what I said. I think at one point I used the phrase deployment instead of a bouquet, but by the time I finished, Roger let out a soft whistle. Well, he said, that's one hell of a pivot. He didn't just say yes, he gave me 3 names. Contacts at local VFW posts. A retired colonel who taught history at the community college. A woman named Bev who ran a military family's support circle and apparently didn't take no for an answer. By the time I hung up, I had a yellow legal pad full of names and numbers and a kind of nervous energy I hadn't felt since Jake's proposal. Next, I called the high school. Coach Ramirez picked up. Yeah, I run the ROTC program. What's this about wait, hang on, deployment drive? When I explained the idea, he was quiet. I could hear the scratch of pen on paper. When I finished, he said, I have 12 cadets who need service hours and parents who love a good cause. Tell me what uniforms to wear and where to show up. The next few days blurred into a rhythm of outreach. I became a one-woman campaign. Flyers. Emails. Late-night text drafts. Yes. I got cracked something open in me. Every question. How can we help? What can we bring? Made the loneliness shrink. The florist, who was supposed to do our centerpieces, offered to donate arrangements for nursing homes. The caterer said he'd feed volunteers at cost. A local church with a big parking lot agreed to host if the weather turned. And every night, I read one of Jake's old letters before bed. Folded pages filled with chicken scratch words like, "Lo, don't wait for life to get quiet. Build something louder than the silence." So that's what I did. I built a day. I pictured rows of folding tables with handwritten cards stacked high. Kids with marker-streaked fingers decorating boxes. Veterans sharing stories beneath flags hung with care. Neighbors coming together, not for a reception, but for recognition. Not for a toast, but for testimony. By the end of the week, I had a spreadsheet that would make a wedding planner proud. Only it wasn't seating charts and menu choices, it was supply lists, donation targets, speaker slots. And tucked at the top in bold letters, deployment drive, honoring service, showing love, holding the line. Because love didn't have to wait. It could work, it could move, it could show up. Even when he couldn't. I parked outside Margaret Whitaker's house just before noon, engine idling as I stared at the ivory-trimmed porch like it might lunge at me. Her neighborhood was quiet, prim, the kind of place where mailboxes were regulation height and every hedge looked freshly manicured. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say a dozen times on the way over. Still, my hands trembled as I reached for the letter I'd written her. Hand delivered. Against every warning. You're giving her an excuse to strike again, Dana had said. You don't owe her anything. But it wasn't about owing. It was about clarity. I needed her to see who I was, not the woman she'd decided I was from, the shadows of her own expectations. I stepped out of the car and walked up the brick path. The air smelled like lavender and control. Her doorbell chime rang like a grandfather clock, long and elegant and unnerving. She opened the door 3 seconds later, as if she'd been standing behind it, waiting. Lauren, she said, brows arched like punctuation marks. I wasn't expecting you. I know, I replied. My voice didn't shake. I held out the envelope. This is for you. She didn't take it at first. Just looked at it like I'd offered her something contagious. I'm organizing an event, I continued, for Jake, for his unit, for all the people he represents. It's on the day of our original wedding. It's called the deployment drive. Her face stayed carved in marble. No blink. No reaction. I've named you honorary chairwoman, I said. Because you're his mother. And whether you like me or not, you're part of his story. That got her. She took the envelope then carefully, like it might detonate. Her lips parted but no sound came out. I hope you'll come, I said softly. I hope you'll stand with us. But if you don't, that's okay too. Then I turned and walked back to my car. My knees threatened to fold with every step, but I didn't look back. Not once. I didn't need her approval, not anymore. But I wanted her to know. This wasn't about vengeance or optics or proving something, it was about Jake. About service. About not letting love be buried in logistics and silence. I drove away before she could call out, if she even wanted to. That night, she did. The phone rang just past 9 p.m. I was folding event flyers at the kitchen table. I recognized her number immediately. Lauren, she said, her voice sharp, clipped. This event, this little production, you've turned my son's deployment into a public spectacle. I sat down slowly, heart thudding. It's not a spectacle. It's a gesture. A way for the community to honor service. It's a pity parade, she hissed. You think turning grief into theater makes you noble? It's attention-seeking. It's self-serving. It's love, I interrupted. Silence. I waited a moment. Then said, you can believe whatever you want, Margaret. But I won't let your bitterness turn this into something it's not. Jake believes in what I'm doing, and that's enough. She didn't say goodbye. Just hung up. The call ended in a sharp click and a heavy silence. But I didn't cry. I looked down at the flyer in my hands, then to Jake's photo beside me, propped against a mason jar of pens. Let them whisper. Let them judge. I knew why I was doing this. And I wasn't stopping. The whispers started 2 days later. Not in person, of course. That would have taken courage. No, this was the quiet war. The kind fought in DMs and family group chats, the kind where you get texts that say, just checking in, hope you're okay, from people who haven't spoken to you since your engagement party, and suddenly you know something's brewing. At first, I ignored it. I had work to do. Donation bins to pick up. A meeting with the mayor's office to plan parking permits. I didn't have time to worry about what Jake's cousin Lindsay posted on Facebook or whether Margaret was calling me performative behind closed doors. But then my inbox filled with cancellations. The local high school pulled out, said the students weren't available after all. The community college who'd agreed to set up a veterans resource booth suddenly had a conflict. One of the caterers backed out, citing an overbooked weekend, even though they'd confirmed the date a month ago. And then came the message from Jake's Aunt Dana, not my sister, his dad's sister. She'd always seemed warm, but her text told another story. Hi, Lauren. I just think this event has taken on a tone that doesn't feel appropriate for the family right now. I know you mean well. But maybe take a step back? Take a step back, like I'd overstepped. Like, turning a wedding day into a community service event for a deployed Marine was somehow offensive. I called Dana, my Dana, immediately. They're circling the wagons, she said flatly, chewing the end of a pen. Margaret's got them convinced you're doing this for attention. What attention? I snapped. There's no press. I didn't even post on my main account. I've been pouring my time, money, and energy into this for him. For them. And now they think I'm exploiting it? Dana was quiet for a moment, then she said, she's afraid of you. I froze. What? She's afraid, Dana repeated. Because you're doing what she never could. Taking something awful and turning it into purpose. You didn't crumble, you didn't beg. You turned the spotlight away from the dress and the venue and the pity party and onto something real, and she hates that. It should have made me feel better. It didn't. All I could think about was Jake. thousands of miles away, probably sleeping on a cot somewhere, rationing toothpaste, trusting the people back home to hold the line for him. And here I was, knee-deep in gossip and sabotage. I opened the event folder on my computer, looked through the volunteer spreadsheet, now peppered with red strike-throughs. The budget had taken a hit. The number of confirmed booths had dropped by half. I clicked on the file labeled Letters from the Unit. Jake had sent them in March. Notes from his team. Quick scribbles about care packages and photos and how much it meant to know people hadn't forgotten them. That's what I was fighting for. Not a seat at Margaret Whittaker's table, but the people on the other side of the world counting on us not to forget. So I opened a new document, started rewriting the schedule, adjusting the layout, cutting back where I had to, strengthening what I could. Let them whisper. I would build something that didn't need their approval, something that would speak louder than their silence. The scrapbook started on accident. I found the first photo wedged between two manuals in Jake's desk drawer. Him and a fellow Marine crouched beside a schoolhouse in Afghanistan, both grinning like idiots, covered in chalk dust and holding a soccer ball. Someone had drawn a crooked heart on the wall behind them with the words, "Thank you, USA." I sat there on the floor, fingers tracing the edge of the photo, throat tight. I remembered him telling me about that day. How they'd brought supplies to a school that hadn't had working toilets in a year. How the interpreter's daughter had given him a bracelet made of string and buttons and called him her giant angel. That picture shouldn't have been hidden in a drawer. So I bought a scrapbook. Not the glossy kind with gold embossed lettering or pastel floral pages. Just a simple linen-bound book with thick paper and a spine that could hold weight. Real weight. I started with the photo. Then came the letters. Jake's notes, sure, but also the ones his unit had sent. Quick, honest fragments of life in places most people couldn't find on a map. Thanks for the socks. I gave mine to a kid who walked a mile barefoot to get water. We hung your postcard above the field radio. It's the only color in here. Tell Lauren her handwriting is better than any font I've seen, like it's smiling. I printed every single one. Page after page, I glued them in. I added captions, dates, maps. I pressed dried wildflowers into the corners, collected from the edge of the park where Jake had proposed. I cut out headlines, snippets of articles about deployments, foreign aid, small towns doing big things. Then I printed a photo of me at the empty altar, standing in the church I didn't get married in. I put it right in the middle of the book, not as a wound, but as a page. A marker of what was lost and what I chose to do with the space left behind. It became a ritual. Every night after phone calls, after volunteer rosters, after chasing down vendors who were suddenly reconsidering, I'd sit with the book and glue one more memory into place. Not just for Jake. Not just for the Marines. For me. Because, for once, I wasn't waiting for someone else to narrate the story. I was telling it. Jake had once written, "Lo, you're the kind of woman who builds shelter from splinters." I didn't understand what that meant until now. Each page was proof that I hadn't crumbled. That I could take the torn-up pieces of this almost wedding and reassemble them into something stronger. By the time I reached the halfway point of the book, the drive had fewer volunteers, less funding, and half the support I'd started with. But it had more heart. It had truth. And every night, as I turned the pages, I remembered the kind of love I was fighting for. Not the kind with rice and champagne and color palettes, the kind with letters, with dirt and string and chalk hearts drawn on school walls, the kind that shows up even when no one's watching. It was a Thursday when the high school pulled out. I'd just finished printing a fresh batch of flyers when my phone buzzed with the email. The subject line was short. Change of plans. I read it 3 times, hoping I'd misunderstood. Dear Ms. Temple, after further discussion with our administration and concerned parents, we've decided to withdraw our participation in the deployment drive. We thank you for the invitation and appreciate your efforts to support our community's military members. Best wishes for a successful event. No signature, no name, just cold, sanitized rejection. I stared at the screen, fingers still hovering above the keyboard, heart thudding in a steady, defeated rhythm. The high school was our anchor. Their ROTC program had been the first to say yes. They were supposed to set up tables, organize letter writing booths, and help direct traffic. Without them, the event would shrink by half. I called Coach Ramirez immediately. He didn't pick up. 2 hours later, he texted, "Sorry." Decision came from above me. Politics. That word again. Politics. Like turning a day meant for community and compassion into a headline. Like honoring my fiancé and his deployed unit had suddenly become controversial. As if remembering those overseas was something to tiptoe around. The rumors were working. Margaret's whisper campaign had traveled further than I thought. She didn't need to storm out of rooms anymore, her silence had evolved. Now it was a current that dragged everything with it. Even the volunteers I thought were loyal started backing out. One said her husband wasn't comfortable making a public statement. Another worried about associations. One just didn't respond at all. By sunset, I had 6 confirmed booths, down from 17. The donation bins sat half empty. The community board event page was flooded with passive-aggressive comments. Is this about one soldier, or all of them? Wouldn't a private gathering be more respectful? Seems opportunistic. Just saying. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by boxes of supplies and rows of unsent postcards, and I let myself feel it. The defeat. The loneliness. The weight of everyone turning away, slowly, one by one, like I'd somehow shamed them by caring too loudly. I thought of Jake, how he once told me. The hardest part isn't the danger. It's wondering if people still remember why you left in the first place. That's what this was. Not a party, not a pity parade, a reminder, a call to care. And I was failing. I sat down on the couch, eyes burning, fingers curled into fists, not out of rage, not even sadness, just exhaustion, just the sheer bone-deep ache of being one person trying to hold up a whole promise. That night, I didn't glue anything into the scrapbook. I didn't open my laptop. I just laid there, in the quiet, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I had made it all about me. Maybe trying to do something loud with my love made me selfish. Maybe Margaret had won. Maybe I wasn't the kind of woman Jake thought I was. And for the first time since the deployment, I let that thought sit with me. Let it bruise. Let it whisper back. I didn't hear the knock at first. It was muffled, distant, like part of a dream. I'd fallen asleep on the couch again, wrapped in Jake's old hoodie, the one that still smelled like cedar and sunblock, and him. My phone was dead. The room was dark. For a second, I didn't know what time it was or what day. The knock came again, louder this time. 3 quick raps, then silence. I peeled myself off the cushions, heart thudding, and opened the door with half a mind to tell whatever delivery person they had the wrong address. But it wasn't a delivery. It was Mr. Franklin, Jake's old platoon mate. We'd met once, briefly, at a ceremony 2 years ago. He'd shaken my hand, called me ma'am, and told Jake he was lucky. Now he stood on my porch in a school hoodie and jeans, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, a clipboard in one hand. I blinked at him. "Franklin?" "Ms. Temple," he said with a small smile. "Heard you might need some backup." I stared at him. How did you even know?" He held up the clipboard. "Coach Ramirez. He's not as quiet as he thinks. Told a few of us what happened. Said you were out here trying to turn a wedding into something bigger. Thought that sounded a lot like something Jake would fall in love with." My throat tightened. "I run the junior ROTC program at Oak Street now," he continued, stepping forward. "Kids need service hours. But more than that, they need something to care about. You got booths still open?" I nodded slowly, afraid if I said anything, I'd cry. He turned and motioned down the sidewalk. That's when I saw them. Students. 10, maybe 12. Wearing matching navy sweatshirts. Some carried folding chairs. Others hauled boxes. One was eating a granola bar and trying to roll up a banner that said, "Letters for Heroes." They filed up the walkway like a miniature army. "This is Gabby, this is Luis, that's Jameson, he has no volume control, just FYI." Franklin's voice was steady, casual, like we were at a church picnic and not in the wreckage of a nearly ruined plan. We've got poster board, Sharpies, a Bluetooth speaker, and 3 parents dropping off tables in the morning. I blinked fast, swallowing hard. You're really doing this? I asked, the words catching in my throat. He smiled. Jake always said you were his anchor. We figured we'd hold the rope until he gets back. Behind him, one of the girls waved at me. Hi, we're not afraid of some drama, don't worry. My mom fights with the PTA all the time. I laughed. It came out sharp and cracked, but real. And just like that, the tide turned. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. For the first time since Margaret's attack, since the cancellations and whispers, I saw what Jake must have seen all along. A community still willing to stand up. Maybe smaller, maybe quieter, but still here. Still showing up. By midnight, the house was full of plans again. Kids arranging tables in my driveway. Mr. Franklin drawing a map on a pizza box. Sharpies squeaking across poster board. Laughter. Noise. Hope. And when they left, I sat back down with the scrapbook, opened to the middle and glued in a fresh page. We showed up. Even when it hurt. Even when they said we shouldn't, we showed up anyway. The email came just before dawn, tucked between a coupon for dog food and a spam message about reverse mortgages. The sender field was a military address I didn't recognize, long, coded, untraceable, but the subject line made my breath catch. FW, from Capt. J. Whitaker, urgent morale share. I opened it with trembling hands, afraid it would be clipped or sterile or full of the standard, "he's safe and sends love" line. I'd already memorized, but it wasn't. It was Jake, or at least a version of him. Raw. Rushed. So unmistakably him that I heard his voice in every line. Lo, they're letting us send one email out today. Morale boost, they called it. I guess that means I'm supposed to say something inspiring, but you know me. I'm terrible with speeches, so I'll just tell you what's in my head. Remember Nassim? The interpreter from Helmand? His daughter is in college now. Engineering. You probably remember? I sent you the picture when she got her visa. You were the one who wrote the letter that tipped the scales. You were the reason. I was telling that story to my squad last night. About you. About how you don't wait. You don't ask for permission. You don't ask if it's okay to care. You just do. You help people. You see need and you answer it. They asked what you were like. I said, she doesn't wait, she does. God, I miss you. But knowing you're out there, doing what you're doing, whatever it is, it gets me through days that don't have hours in them. Nights that never end. Keep doing it. Keep being you. Still yours. Always. J. I read it once, then again, until the words blurred into something both sacred and grounding. Like a tether pulled tight across the world, the sun was barely up. My hands still smelled like paint and poster glue. I hadn't washed my hair in 2 days. But I sat there on the kitchen floor and cried like it was the first time I'd cried in months. Because this wasn't just a message, it was a mirror. A confirmation. I was that woman. I was the one who didn't wait. Who didn't fold. Even if the guest list shrank. Even if Margaret never showed. Even if every booth got cancelled and every whisper grew louder. Jake believed in me. And he wasn't alone anymore. By 9 a.m., I had rewritten the entire event plan, simplified it, refocused it, fewer frills. More stories. Less noise. More truth. We didn't need rows of vendors, we needed meaning. A booth for writing letters. A wall for pinning photographs of loved ones in uniform. A table where kids could draw thank you cards with crayons and glitter glue. A memory station with old uniforms and gear and the stories behind them. The event wasn't shrinking. It was refining. Becoming what it was always meant to be. Love. In action. Stripped of spectacle. The way Jake would have wanted. The way I wanted. And for the first time in days, I stood up from my computer, poured myself a cup of cold coffee, and felt something fierce move through me. This wasn't about saving face anymore. This was about showing up. For him, for them, for me. It always had been. I'd just stapled the new layout map to the community board when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. After the last few weeks, unknown meant risk. But something in my gut told me to answer. Lauren Temple? The voice asked, smooth and formal. This is she. This is Donna Malin from the mayor's office. We've received a few notes about your upcoming event. Deployment drive, correct? My heart stalled. This was it. The call telling me it was cancelled. Shut down. Politicized beyond repair. Yes, I said, voice steady, ready to defend it again, ready to list every approval, every form, every soul who still believed in it. Well, Donna said, Mayor Lawson would like to attend, if you'll have him. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? He's been briefed. He supports the message, service, community, resilience. He'd like to speak, if you can fit him in. And he's planning to issue a city proclamation in honor of Captain Whitaker's deployment. And your efforts. I sank onto the edge of a folding chair, flyer still in my lap. Are you sure this isn't a prank? Donna laughed. I assure you, ma'am, it's not. We'll arrive at 1015. Thank you for what you're doing. It matters. The call ended. And for a long minute, I just sat there, phone in my lap, watching the sun pour through the kitchen blinds like it knew something I didn't. The mayor. He wanted to come. Not out of obligation. Not for show. Because someone, people, had heard. Had cared. The wind was shifting. By noon, I had 3 new volunteers sign up online. A local church emailed to say they were collecting baked goods for the event. A woman named Esther called to ask if she could bring her son, who'd just come home from basic training. He wants to thank someone, she said. And I think your event might help him figure out who. I reopened the spreadsheet. Rebuilt the schedule. It didn't look like the original plan, but it looked alive, flexible, honest. People weren't showing up out of pity. They were showing up because they wanted to be part of something that reminded them we're not alone. That night, I added a new section to the scrapbook. A page titled Voices. I printed out Donna's email. Taped it beside Jake's forwarded message. Below it, I wrote in black ink, when they try to quiet you, speak louder with love. When they walk away, keep building. Someone will always hear. I added a photo of the mayor's face from the town website. Not out of admiration, out of proof. They heard. They were listening now. And this time, they were with me. The whisper campaign hadn't won. The silence hadn't spread. Instead, something louder was building beneath it. And I was ready for it. I didn't sleep the night before the event. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through checklists and worst-case scenarios like a broken news ticker. What if no one showed? What if the mayor backed out? What if Margaret came just to tear it all down in front of everyone? By sunrise, I was already moving, loading folding tables into the back of Dana's SUV, triple-checking the donation bins, making sure the Letters to Soldiers booth had enough pens that actually worked. Every movement was tight, purposeful, like if I slowed down, even for a second, the nerves might catch up and crush me. The venue was smaller than our original church hall. Just a community center rec room with scuffed linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights. But it felt right. Real. A place built not for pageantry but for people. By 9 a.m., the first volunteers arrived. Gabby and Luis from the Oak Street ROTC program rolled in with matching polos and a Bluetooth speaker playing soft acoustic covers of patriotic songs. Jameson carried a stack of laminated posters and a boombox that he insisted was vintage cool. Dana brought pastries and a big thermos of too-strong coffee. We set up the tables like puzzle pieces, each one serving a story. The Letters of Thanks booth was front and center, flanked by tables for care package supplies. Soap, socks, notebooks, instant coffee. Along one wall, we hung a photo collage, Jake's unit, local veterans, community members who'd served. In the center, I pinned the photo of Jake at the schoolhouse, chalk dust on his uniform, that crooked heart behind him. People trickled in. A retired Navy medic with his grandkids. A woman whose brother had just deployed to Syria. 2 kids too young to understand war, but old enough to want to say thank you. The line at the letter-writing table started forming by noon. Handwriting was everywhere. Crayon scrawls and careful cursive, ballpoint pen smudges and stickers shaped like stars. Some notes were only a sentence. Thank you for being brave. Others were whole paragraphs, stories from strangers to strangers, connected only by the thread of gratitude. I walked between tables, answering questions, refilling markers, taking in every word, every smile. No one asked about the wedding, no one whispered about Margaret, they were here for something bigger. By the time the clock struck 1, the room was humming. Laughter, stories, the shuffle of chairs, the soft scratch of letters being written. And then, I felt it. A presence at the door. I turned, heart skipping. The mayor stood just inside the entrance, flanked by 2 staffers, a proclamation rolled in his hand like a torch. He gave me a nod. And behind him, more people. A second wave of volunteers. Curious neighbors. A local news camera. People I didn't recognize, but who looked at the room like they'd just walked into something worth remembering. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, hands folded at my waist, watching it all unfold. It wasn't what I'd planned. It was something better. Smaller. Louder. Real. The mayor asked to speak at 1045. Just 15 minutes, his assistant said, but I could see the glint in his eyes as he scanned the room. He wasn't here for a photo op. He was here because he felt it. The weight of the letters, the stories pouring out of every corner of the rec room, the quiet, stubborn love that had taken root in all this makeshift beauty. We gathered near the photo wall. People hushed themselves naturally, without prompting. Kids stepped back from the glitter station, hands stained red and gold. A veteran with trembling hands tucked his letter into a bin and joined the crowd. The mayor adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat. Good afternoon, he began, voice steady. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't your typical Saturday event, and it certainly isn't what anyone planned a few months ago. A few people nodded. Some glanced at me. He smiled. I've been in office a long time, I've been to my share of parades and fundraisers. But this is different. This is quieter. But it's louder than most of what I'd seen. He reached into the folder one of his aides held out. Unrolled the proclamation. I stand here today to recognize not just one man's sacrifice, but a community's courage to respond with compassion, creativity, and resilience. Captain Jake Whitaker serves abroad, but the strength behind him is standing right here. He looked straight at me. And that strength, he said, has a name. I felt everything in me still. He continued, Lauren Temple, you've turned personal heartbreak into collective purpose. You've shown that service doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it writes postcards, sometimes it builds booths out of folding chairs, sometimes it simply refuses to give up. He held out a small, heavy object. A city medallion, gold and polished, engraved with the seal of our town. And so, on behalf of the city of Coldridge, I declare today, August 2nd, a day in honor of community-driven service. A day in honor of those who show up, no matter what. He paused. And a day in honor of you, Lauren. The room broke into applause. Not loud or thunderous, just warm, sustained. People clapping with open palms and full hearts. I didn't cry, not yet. I just stepped forward, took the medallion, and whispered, "Thank you," into the microphone. I looked out at the crowd, at the ROTC students with glitter in their hair, at the veterans nodding slowly, at the kids clinging to their parents, watching me like maybe, just maybe, what I'd done mattered. And then I saw it. In the back, near the exit, half hidden behind a row of standing flags. Margaret. She stood alone, arms folded tight across her chest, sunglasses shading her eyes even though we were indoors. She didn't clap, didn't smile. But she didn't leave. She stood still, watching. And I didn't look away. I didn't acknowledge her either. Not yet. Because this moment wasn't for her. It was for every hand that wrote a letter. For every neighbor who brought cookies. For every person who dared to believe that absence doesn't erase love. It was for Jake. And for me. I didn't know what to expect when I stepped up to the microphone. The applause from the mayor's speech had quieted. People were fanning themselves, wiping their eyes, checking the photo wall. The room still held its warmth, but the hum of conversation had dropped into a waiting hush. I adjusted the mic with both hands, heart beating so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My name is Lauren Temple, I began, voice low but steady. You were all supposed to be here today for a different reason. You were supposed to be here in pews, not folding chairs. You were supposed to see me in a white dress, not sneakers and a clipboard. A few light laughs scattered through the crowd. I let them settle. But then Jake got the call. South Sudan. A humanitarian mission. No postponement. No compromise. Just orders. I paused. Let the words sink. And in those first days, I thought I'd lost something. A day. A wedding. Maybe even a piece of myself. But then I realized something that's easy to forget when you're buried in planning and Pinterest boards and place cards. I looked out at them. Really looked. Love doesn't need a venue. It needs action. It needs presence, even in absence. And that's what this is. I gestured around the room. At the letters, the hand-painted signs, the care packages piled high near the exit. This is what love looks like when it doesn't get to wear a dress, when it doesn't get cake or slow dances or a first kiss in front of 100 people. I swallowed, hard. This is what love looks like when it waits, and serves, and shows up anyway. More silence. Then, sniffling. Soft, but real. I reached under the podium and pulled out the stack of letters from Jake's unit. I held them up one at a time. This one's from a corporal who said your socks made him cry. Light laughter again. I held up another. This one's from a medic who says he taped your drawings on the ceiling above his cot, so it's the last thing he sees before he sleeps. I spread them out like cards across the podium. These are proof that what you did today? It mattered. Not just to me, to them. And then, slowly, I stepped out from behind the mic, picked up a box of letters and walked straight into the crowd, handing them out one by one. To the woman in the front row who brought cookies and didn't ask for recognition. To the high schooler who'd painted "Welcome Home" on 3 different posters just in case. To the grandpa who whispered, "My son never got a letter," and smiled like this made it right. No spotlight, no ceremony, just hands passing paper. Quiet thank yous. Silent nods. And when I looked up, I saw the line. People waiting to write more. We ran out of postcards by 3 p.m. We ran out of boxes by 4. But the people kept coming. And I stood in the middle of all of it, arms open, eyes wide, heart full, knowing. This wasn't the wedding I'd planned. But it was everything love was supposed to be. She stood beneath the oak tree just past the parking lot, arms folded, sunglasses still on despite the thick gray clouds that had rolled in around 4. I noticed her just as I was handing out the last bundle of postcards to a little boy in an oversized ROTC hoodie. He took them like treasure, promising to draw flags on everyone. I smiled, thanked him, turned, and saw her. Margaret. She hadn't moved. Just watched. I felt a dozen instincts rise all at once. Walk away. Confront her. Cry. Don't cry. Pretend I didn't see her, but instead, I inhaled. Long, slow, grounding. And then I picked up a stack of letters from Jake's old unit and walked toward the crowd again. I didn't give her my eyes. I didn't offer her a gesture. She was not the center of this story. The people were. The volunteers still folding chairs. The mother gently tying a red ribbon around a care package box. The high school boy quietly reading a letter from a soldier 3,000 miles away, his lips moving silently, as if tasting the words. This was theirs. And mine. And Jake's. Margaret could stand beneath her tree of judgment as long as she wanted. I had work to do. The mayor was gone now. So were the press and their polite questions. No cameras lingered, just a mess of paper scraps, lukewarm coffee, and hands still reaching for something to carry home. Dana came up beside me at some point, handed me a water bottle, nodded toward the tree. She hasn't left, she murmured. I know, she's watching you. She's allowed. Do you want me to? No, I said. She can stay. Dana nodded once, then disappeared into the cleanup crew. Margaret never moved. Not once. She just stood there, mouth tight, arms crossed, as if holding herself together. But she didn't walk away. She didn't scoff or frown or make a show. And that silence? So familiar, so cutting, didn't land the way it used to, because now I had louder things. Thank you notes in crooked handwriting. Taped drawings from 7-year-olds that said, "We love our soldiers." A woman named Esther hugging me with tears in her eyes saying, "My son said he wants to be more like your fiancé." These were louder, deeper, realer. When the last table folded and the last bin was hauled into Dana's car, I finally let myself look toward the tree again. She was gone. No goodbye. No scene. Just vanished, like a shadow pulled back by the wind. And all I felt was this: she'd seen it. All of it. And maybe, just maybe, she'd felt it too. The cleanup took longer than we thought. The floors were dotted with glitter and torn tape, forgotten paper cups, and one crayon drawing of a tank with smiley faces. The kind of mess that only happens when something real unfolds. Unplanned, imperfect, but absolutely alive. I was sweeping beneath the main table when Dana called out, "Lo, they want your attention up front." I looked up, confused. Most people had already gone. Just a few stragglers left, loading boxes, sharing quiet hugs, promising to stay in touch, like we'd all just lived through something together. The mayor had returned. I hadn't seen him come in. He stood by the podium again, this time with a staffer holding a camera and something small wrapped in navy velvet. "I hope you don't mind," he said as I approached, brushing dust off his lapel. "There was one last thing I forgot earlier." I gave a tired but polite smile. "Of course." He cleared his throat. "Today, this city witnessed what it means to serve without expectation. To love without condition. To lead from behind, not with titles or rank, but with action." He motioned to his staffer who handed him the velvet box. "We have a small program. Not many know about it. It's meant for citizens who create lasting, meaningful change. It's not political. It's not ceremonial. It's earned." He opened the box. Inside was a round medallion, engraved with the city seal and the words, "Service, Heart, Resilience." He held it up. "Lauren Temple, we name you this year's Citizen Champion." I couldn't speak. The room, as small as it was now, let out a warm gasp of applause. Someone clapped too hard. Someone sniffled. I blinked rapidly, willing the tears to stay where they were. He pressed the medallion into my hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for reminding us what community looks like." And just behind the applause, behind the staffer and the volunteers, a figure stepped forward. Margaret. She was alone. No sunglasses this time. No tight lips or crossed arms. She looked tired. Human. Her eyes met mine. Not with fire. Not with that chill she'd worn like armor. With something else. I held the medallion in one hand and met her gaze fully. And then? She stepped closer. Not the whole way, just close enough for her voice to carry. "I read the letters," she said softly. I didn't move. "I saw the boy with the drawing," she added. "The woman whose son cried. The photos." She paused. I was wrong. The words didn't crash into me like I thought they would. They landed gently, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. I thought, she took a breath, "I thought this marriage would always come second, to duty, to deployments, to your strength. But today I saw something else." She looked down, then back up, her voice cracked. "You're not behind him. You're beside him. You always were." Silence. Then, "I'm proud of you," she said. And in that moment, all the tension between us, all the silence, all the years of holding back, unspoken questions, unmet approval, it fell. Like glitter settling after the storm. I nodded once. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. 6 months later, the air smelled like magnolia and something new. Something I couldn't name but had been waiting to feel for what felt like forever. I stood in front of the mirror, the one in Dana's bedroom, my wedding dress finally zipped all the way up, the veil draped gently over my shoulder. It had been altered. Simpler now, no long train, no heavy beading. Just clean lines and fabric that moved when I did. Margaret stood behind me. She was the one who zipped it. Not a word passed between us in that moment. Just her hands, gentle, steady, pulling the dress closed. Her reflection met mine in the mirror. There was something in her eyes that made my throat close. I always imagined this moment with my mother, I whispered. But I'm glad it's you. She blinked fast, then gave the smallest nod. She would have liked you, I added. I do, Margaret said, voice tight. We didn't need more than that. The ceremony was nothing like the one we'd planned a year ago. No flower wall. No elaborate reception hall. No four-tier cake or string quartet. Just the church where Jake had been baptized. Just family. Just the people who'd stayed through the storm. Jake stood at the front, in his dress blues, hair a little longer, eyes somehow both sharper and softer than before. He smiled the moment he saw me. The kind of smile that dissolves everything else. I walked toward him, heart beating slow and full, veil lifting gently with the breeze from an open window. The organ wasn't playing, just the hush of love and the shuffle of people who mattered. When I reached him, he took my hand like he'd never let it go again. I missed you, he whispered. I never left, I replied. The vows were short, honest. We didn't need much. Jake said, you held the line when I couldn't, you carried us both. I said, you gave me a reason to believe again. Even from across the world. And when the minister said, you may kiss the bride, we laughed before we did, because it felt less like a beginning and more like a homecoming. At the small reception in the church hall, there was no DJ. Just a playlist Dana made and a table full of potluck dishes. On the guestbook table sat the scrapbook. Jake's letters, the photos, the glitter-covered cards from the kids, the medallion from the mayor. And beside it, a new frame. A photo of me and Margaret, arms linked, standing in front of the photo wall at the deployment drive. We're not smiling for the camera. We're smiling at something just out of frame, someone who had made it home. Taped inside the back cover of the scrapbook, one last letter. From Jake. Lo, you were never second. You were always home. The night settled gently, like the kind that doesn't ask for anything but still gives you everything. The last guests had gone, leaving behind half-eaten pie, wilting flower stems, and laughter caught in the corners of the room. Jake and I sat on the back steps of the church, my heels kicked off, his dress shoes undone. I leaned against his shoulder, his jacket draped over both of us like a shield. Remember when this day was supposed to happen last year? I asked, chin resting on his arm. I remember thinking I'd never get to see you in that dress, he said. Now I'm mad I ever doubted it. I smiled, pulling the jacket tighter around us. It's not the same dress. I had it changed. Jake turned toward me. It's better. It's you. We sat there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't press or push, the kind you only earn after everything else has been stripped away. Your mom's different, I said quietly. He nodded. She wrote me, told me about the event, about the letters. Said you showed her what love looks like when it works. She told me she was wrong. Jake exhaled. She never says that. I know, I whispered. He kissed the top of my head. I looked out over the lawn, at the lanterns still glowing, the chairs half stacked, the wind carrying little scraps of confetti that had never been thrown. I felt tired, but not drained, not worn out, just full. You were right, I said, about everything. He raised an eyebrow. You're going to have to be more specific. I laughed. About love. About not waiting. About building something louder than silence. Jake reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Yellowed. Familiar. I recognized the creases immediately. You kept this? I asked. It never left me, he said. Even when I couldn't hold it, I had it memorized. It was the first letter I'd written him after the deployment was announced. Back before I had a plan. Before the scrapbook. Before Margaret. Before the mess and the fight and the fire. I took it from his hand, smoothed it over my lap, and read the last line aloud. When you come home, I won't ask where you've been. I'll show you what waited for you. He watched me with something deeper than pride. You did, he whispered. You showed me. I folded the letter slowly. Set it on the step beside us. Then I took his hand, intertwined our fingers, and rested my head back on his shoulder. I'm glad I stayed, I said. Me too, he replied. We didn't need more than that. No vows, no speeches, no grand finale. Just this quiet end to a long road. The bride who stayed. And the man who came home to her.